All right, this is going to be a very long episode, so grab yourself a drink and strap yourself in.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a beer.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Classic Gaming Quarterly, or CGQ Plus, Christmas Special. And my idea is to do this sort of in the same vein as the Halloween special that I did last year. So I picked out 3 Christmases that I have memories of that we can talk about, and a few other things in between. And we also have some mail that we'll go through. I'm going to do that a little bit differently this time, in that I'll go ahead and show the postcards up front. But I've got 3 items that different people sent me, or 3 packages that different people sent me. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle those throughout the episode so that we don't get bogged down in doing too much mail here at the beginning. The first one here comes from Jacques in, he's in Los Angeles, but then he also says in his postcard, finally got some snow this year in Springdale, Utah. So I don't know if he's from LA, or I sent the postcard back to LA. Maybe he's rich and has a vacation home in Utah. And then the postcard itself is from Zion National Park. So that's pretty cool. Thank you, Jacques. The next one, which we just got 3 new postcards this week, actually. The first one here comes from Mike in, does this say Nantiglow, Pennsylvania? I haven't sent your card back to you yet, so I haven't looked up the address to make sure it's correct. It says Nantiglow, Pennsylvania. So I don't know, I've never heard of that, but the postcard here is from the University of Pittsburgh. So that's kind of cool, just because he mentions on the card back here that he works at the University of Pittsburgh. So, you know, we both work at universities. He says it's okay to read this on the air, so, he tells me how much he likes the show, which of course I appreciate. And then he asks a question. He says, have you ever had a video game disaster? I let my friend borrow my Zelda. He threw it back to me. I yelled, no! And caught it, but only by the sleeve. The cart continued and hit the wall. It then made a sproing noise. Sproing. It wiped my game. That seems kind of weird. He's saying that he lost his save game. I had just started the second quest. Thankfully, it did still save, and I knew the Zelda trick. Never lent it again. That's odd that it would wipe out the save, but I mean, I don't know enough about electronics to know why that would happen, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of any kind of disaster that I've had that would compare to that. You know, when I think about stuff like that, I think about how many times I tried to destroy my NES controllers, and I think I've told that story before. You know, I used to get so upset, I would grab my NES controller by the cord and like whip it around like a lasso and like hit the fireplace with it. And so the controller had some dents in it, but I never did break it. The next one comes from our friend in Cambodia, who sent another one. The card, I'm not going to say this right. The card is from Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, there in Cambodia, for anybody that doesn't. I don't want to bring the show down talking about this kind of thing, really, but, this was when the Khmer Rouge took over the government in Cambodia and, started massacring thousands and thousands of people. They did a lot of that here. This was Tuol Sleng Prison. He says, I sent you a painting and a letter. I hope you get it soon. So I haven't gotten it yet, but, I check the P.O. box a few times a week, so whenever it gets here, it'll be on the show. And then the last postcard I just got today, actually. This one's pretty cool. This one comes from Sean in Carroll, Ohio. And check this postcard out. It's from Mute City, which is, of course, from F-Zero. F-Zero. People on YouTube don't like the way I say the word zero. I don't really know why. Anyway, that's a really cool postcard, though. I'm not sure where he would have gotten it. Redbubble again. Redbubble apparently has really cool postcards. I always think of t-shirts when I think of Redbubble. But anyway, that's all the postcards. Once again, we do have 3 packages, but we'll get into those a little bit later. I tried to kind of Christmas it up. I've got an ugly Christmas sweater on. It's got some dinosaurs on it there, and I've got a green shirt. There are lights on back here, but they're very dim for some reason. I don't know if the batteries are low or if they were always this dim. I feel like they were always pretty dim. I bought like this Christmas lights necklace that lights up to wear. You know, well, I bought it to wear when I did this video, but A, it made me feel a little bit foolish, and B, I put it on and turned it on, and they weren't bright enough that you could tell on camera that the lights were even on, so it just looked like I randomly had Christmas lights dangling around my neck, so it just looked kind of stupid. And being that it is Christmas, and this might be a long episode, so I'm probably going to need to, you know, keep my my whistle wet, so to speak, I brought up, I don't know what you call this, a carafe? I don't know. I kind of made a hot Christmas beverage, which I'm enjoying in one of my Glühwein mugs that I got at a Christmas market when I visited Munich. And this is like half harvest spice tea, half apple cider, and I put a little bit of cognac in it, but not enough that it's not going to do anything. I can't even taste it, but... And of course it's hot, so anyway, as I said, we have 3 Christmases we're going to talk about. The first Christmas that I wrote down was the Christmas of 1984, simply because that's the first Christmas that I actually remember, which is odd because I was 7. But I don't have any real, like, rock-solid memories of, like, oh, this was Christmas when I was in 1st grade or Christmas when I was in kindergarten. So this is Christmas of 2nd grade. But I thought I would kind of use that as a springboard to just sort of more generally talk about Christmases from when I was that age, roughly, you know, 82, 83, 84, whatever. The first thing I wrote down here is the mall Santa. That was like a big deal when I was a kid. I don't know how much of a big deal it is anymore, but, you know, your parents, your grandparents would take you down to the mall, and you'd wait in some really long line just so that you could sit on Santa's lap and tell him what you wanted for Christmas. And then they had, at least back then, I'm sure now it's all digital, but, you know, back then they had like one of those Polaroid instant cameras, and you'd get your picture taken with Santa, and they would just hand you the Polaroid, which seems so ridiculous because it's not even something you could make copies of. I don't think I have any of them anymore, but I do certainly remember getting my picture taken on Santa's lap on numerous occasions. But that also then made me think about shopping malls in general during Christmas, and they would decorate them like over the top, and they were piping that Christmas music through the PA system just to try to get people in the Christmas mood and get them to spend more money, really. But, you know, if you had problems getting into this Christmas spirit somehow, you could always go to the mall. One other thing that I thought of thinking about the mall around Christmas time, and I don't know if this even still exists anymore, but when I was a kid, there would be like the Hillshire Farms stand that just somehow magically appeared like around Thanksgiving or maybe as far back as Halloween. But then after Christmas, it was like gone. And it would be this big stand that would be like in the middle of the mall, like it wouldn't be a shop. And they were selling all those gift baskets with like summer sausage in them and smoked cheese. I also was thinking about, you know, Christmases at my grandparents' house when I was a little kid. You know, my grandfather passed away when I was in 7th grade, but, you know, I hadn't lived, you know, I lived with my dad, so I lived somewhere else, you know, 2nd grade through the end of 5th grade. And so when I think about Christmases at my grandparents' house, I think more about when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And there was a room in the house that was called the family room. Like, it was like a pretty standard, like 3-bedroom ranch-style house, but it had like a living room, which just had like nice furniture in it, and like I wasn't allowed to go in there. And then there was like the family room, and that's where the TV was, and like my grandfather had his lazy boy in there, and that's where we used to hang out for the most part. And they had like one of those classic, stereotypical wooden cabinet console televisions that like everybody had in like the 70s and the 80s. And, you know, one of the things about those TVs was they had that big surface on top because the controls were on the front with the TV screen. And so you could put stuff on top. And like, at some point my grandparents got a VCR, but that was much later. And I really don't remember what was on top of that TV when I was a little kid. But at Christmas, that's where they would set up the Christmas tree, because they had just a little, like, 3-foot artificial Christmas tree that they would bring down out of the garage. And then they'd put a few presents there, but because it was just the top of the TV, if there was presents that needed to get put out, they'd put them somewhere else or whatever. But my grandmother usually wasn't around for Christmas, actually, because I have an uncle who is my grandparents' only son, and he lives on the East Coast, and he has kids as well. And so my grandmother would go back every year and spend Christmas with them. That's the only time they would see each other, and my grandfather, for some reason, wouldn't go. I mean, other things, just thinking about that family room, that's also where we used to spend New Year's. Because even when I moved away and lived with my dad, what I would usually do is I would spend Christmas with my dad, and then I would come visit my mom for New Year's. And we would go over to my grandparents' house, and we would watch Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, or whatever it's called, in my grandparents' family room. And like my grandma would go out, and she would get like a platter of cold cuts. So, like turkey and salami and cheese, and we would drink I forgot what they're called. It's like soda water with grenadine in it, like cherry syrup, because nobody in the family drank alcohol, ironically. And so we would sit around, and obviously I wasn't going to drink, I was a kid, but I'm saying that's what everybody was drinking. And we would just eat cold cuts. And my grandparents always had like a tin of Danish butter cookies, like always, and so a lot of times we'd have those out. And, New Year's Eve was like the only day of the year where I was allowed to stay up past midnight. But it was funny because my parents knew that I would never make it and say, oh yeah, go ahead, you can stay up past midnight. But I would hardly ever make it to actually see the ball drop. But getting into what I got for Christmas that year, as I said, this is the first Christmas where I can actually remember what I got as my main Christmas gift. And I think I may have talked about Masters of the Universe just a little bit already. That was like the first cartoon that I really got into. Sometime, maybe first grade, second grade.
Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic sword and said, "By the power of Grayskull!" Our friends, the Sorceress, Man-at-Arms, and Orko. Together we defend Castle Grayskull from the evil forces of Skeletor.
I'm not sure when the cartoon came out, but 84 is when I kind of remember watching it. And every day after school, they would show, maybe not until a little bit later, like 4:30, they would show an episode of He-Man, or He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And then I remember after that, they would show a rerun of Different Strokes, because I used to watch both of those. But I was really into He-Man. It was the first cartoon that I really remember like watching religiously. But for Christmas that year, I remember what I wanted was Snake Mountain. So I had Castle Grayskull. That was like the base, or whatever you want to call it, for He-Man and all the good guys. And then Snake Mountain was like the evil analog. So that's like where Skeletor and all the bad guys hung out. And Snake Mountain was cool because it had a microphone in it. Like you had to put batteries in Snake Mountain, and it had this microphone you could pick up and pull out of there, and you could talk into it, and it had a little speaker in it, so you could like pretend you were Skeletor, I guess, or whatever. And I remember having that, but I remember I was like too embarrassed, because if I was playing with that in my room, then like my parents would hear, and I was like embarrassed and didn't want to do that. But that was again, it's the first time I remember opening Christmas presents. But for as long as I lived with my dad, with one exception that I can think of, we always opened our presents on Christmas Eve, right? I mean, traditionally and stereotypically, at least in this country, we open our presents on Christmas morning, right? You wake up on Christmas morning, you run downstairs, and you open your presents. But for some reason, my dad always had us doing it on Christmas Eve. And I don't know if it was just because he was excited too, or whatever. But yeah, anyway, that's Christmas of 1984. Now, now let's go to the first thing that I got. So it's not like a big deal or anything, but I really appreciated it. So this first thing that I got came from Mike up in Portland, who we've gotten a postcard from Mike before. And I could swear Mike... Actually, no, you know what? Mike has the distinction of being the first person ever to send a postcard into the show. So when I first started doing the postcards thing, he sent me like a whole pack of postcards from his... from Oregon. I think they were just like... Or I have them, I have them in the postcard box. I don't have them here. But yeah, anyway, not to be confused with Michael from Lake Oswego. That's a different guy. This is Mike from Portland. And Mike is part of a group of a few viewers of the show who really want me to start making cooking videos. on Twitter, I'll talk about whatever I cooked, or I'll put a picture up on Instagram. And so he keeps asking me to start, a series of videos and call them Classic Cooking Quarterly. And which, I don't know, maybe I'll do it at some point. It'd be cool to like cook the kind of stuff that I ate when I was a kid. Like people said I should make the first video, I should cook Salisbury steak from scratch. But anyway, Mike ordered this off of Amazon and had it sent to me, I guess to try to get me to start making the videos. He sent me an apron that says, "I don't need a recipe, I'm Italian." And is that true? I don't know. Like, I don't see, it looks pretty good there. Well, you can't really see that much of it. But I don't know how true that is. I don't cook with a recipe ever. I don't know if that's an Italian thing or, I don't know. I cook the same stuff over and over again, so at this point I don't need a recipe anymore. But this is a cool apron, and you have my assurance that if at some point I start making cooking videos, or even just make one, that I will absolutely wear this apron in the episode. So thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate that. Now, before we get to the second Christmas, just as sort of a little interlude, I just thought I would talk about Christmas movies. So you remember when I did the Halloween episode, like we did, here's my top 5 favorite Halloween candies, or I forgot what the other one I did. I don't know if it was movies or what it was, but I thought I'd put together a list of my favorite Christmas movies, and I was kind of struck by the fact that there really aren't very many Christmas movies that I like to watch, or that I've even seen. Like I was asking, some of my coworkers at work, I would just say like, "Hey, what are your top 3 Christmas movies?" And they were naming off movies that I've never seen. Like, part of it is that I work with younger people, and so they're naming off things that are kind of maybe after my time, or like, people were saying like, "Oh, The Grinch," but like they're talking about the live action Jim Carrey movie, The Grinch. Like, if I want to watch The Grinch, I'm going to watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas, like not the Jim Carrey movie, although I'm sure it's very good. Or like Elf with Will Ferrell. I've never seen that. But what's also weird is that unlike my taste in Christmas music, where I really want like the classics, like any Christmas song that's sung by like Bing Crosby or Nat King Cole or Frank Sinatra or Elvis, like I love that stuff. But for the most part, like newer covers, I don't really want to hear those. Like an exception to that would be like Michael Bublé, because he sounds like he's from the old era, so they still have that classic sound. But when it comes to movies, you might be shocked to know that I haven't watched almost any of the classic Christmas movies, by which I mean I've seen A Christmas Carol, but maybe not the popular one. Maybe it was even a cartoon. But like Miracle on 34th Street or It's a Wonderful Life, never seen them. So I really was only able to come up with 3 movies. And these are 3 movies that I will watch pretty much every Christmas, actually. And, these are kind of in order, I guess, but, it doesn't really matter. So number 3, I never understood, it seems like all of a sudden this year, this is like some kind of controversy, like is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Like, I didn't think that there were people out there who didn't think that Die Hard was a Christmas movie. Like, yes, it's an action movie, but it's quite clearly a Christmas action movie. I didn't realize that was even like up for debate. Die Hard came out in the summer of 1988, but I didn't see it in the movie theater. I saw it, my dad rented it, because my dad used to rent videos like a lot. We had a VCR. We didn't really go to the movies all too often, but he would stop at the Tower Records or some other video store after work, and he would, bring home tapes for us to watch, especially if it was like a Friday night. And he brought home Die Hard. And so that would have been sometime around the holidays in 1988, because like I said, the movie came out in the summer. I might have even seen it during Christmas vacation in 1988, but I wouldn't swear to that. But that became one of my favorite Christmas movies and one of my favorite movies. And it was a movie that my dad and I really enjoyed together. I think we saw it multiple times together, over the years before he passed away. And I do remember that we actually went and saw Die Hard 2 together in the movie theater. And we both liked it. I know people now will say that Die Hard 2 isn't anywhere near as good as the first Die Hard. There was nothing it was ever going to do to be as good as the first Die Hard, but I think Die Hard 2 is a solid movie personally, and it keeps the Christmas theme going. So I wrote down on the list Die Hard and 2, because they're both Christmas movies, and while the first one's better than the second, they're both very good. Now, the second one, I'll have more to say about the second one later on in the episode, but number 2 I wrote down is Home Alone. Home Alone came out in 1990, so I would have been 13. I don't believe that I saw Home Alone in the movie theater, but that was a movie that I think I actually had on VHS tape. Like, we might have bought it. This would have been back after I was living with my mom, but we used to often buy the previously viewed videotapes at the video store because they were cheaper. And, you know, sometimes they might have little tracking issues or whatever, but, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of money, so if we could save money, you know, when they have little sales, like, you know, 5 tapes for $20 or something at the video store for the previously viewed stuff, you know, she was going to be like all over that. And that's how I got a lot of my video games back then too, is buying previously played games. But I'll have a little bit more to say about Home Alone later, but what an awesome Christmas movie that is. And then number 1 by a long shot, my absolute favorite Christmas movie, not going to be a surprise to anybody, is A Christmas Story. And, you know, they do their 24-hour marathon now every year on cable. If it were up to me, I'll sit there and watch it all 12 times. Like, I love it. Like, my mom will get sick of it after a while. Like, if I'm spending Christmas with my mom, you know, she'll be like, oh, can we watch something else? And I'm like, no, it's, you know, Ralphie's about to fight the bully, you know, or whatever. Like, I just, you know, they show it for 24 hours straight for a reason. And that's because it's a really easy movie to watch over and over and over again. And so I love it. Christmas Story came out in 1983, but I didn't know anything about that movie for years. The first time I ever saw that movie was the Christmas of 1990. I very specifically remember that at that point, my dad and stepmom had split up for a while, which was awesome. But my stepmom lived like a half an hour away from me, so that was less awesome. And, you know, of course, my sister was around by then, and so my dad would come down a lot. And to go visit my sister, and he'd stay with my stepmom, and so I'd have to come down and spend the weekend with them, which I didn't like as much, just only because I wanted to stay away from my stepmom. Like, I used to like, while they were split up, I would go up and visit my dad, because then he was living by himself in a bachelor pad, and we used to have a good old time. But, I mean, that's getting off topic. But anyway, so it was, we spent a couple Christmases in a row at this house that my stepmom was living in, not too far away from me. It was like in some little town outside the city where I lived. And so I was there, you know, I spent like probably Christmas Eve and Christmas morning there in 1990, and Christmas Story was on TV. And I remember thinking, like, where has this movie been, and why have I not seen it until now? But it's just, like I said, I could watch it over and over again. It's one of the very few movies that I have on Blu-ray, which is funny because why do you need Christmas Story on Blu-ray? But they were selling it at Costco for like, you know, $8, so I grabbed it. And then the one thing I'll say about that is that they always have it in the credits. I think it's at the beginning where, you know, it mentions that it was based on a book or on a collection of short stories by this guy named Gene Shepard, who I think was the narrator in the movie. And the name of the book or collection is called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, I think. And I finally, at one point, bought it, like the ebook, and I had it on my iPad. And I was reading it, you know, I used to travel a lot for work, as I've talked about before. And I remember I was sitting on an airplane reading that, and I was laughing so hard I was crying. So, you know, it's an easy read. It's not very long, and it's, you know, it's not very complex or anything. So if you're looking for something to read this Christmas, especially if maybe you're hanging out with some family that you don't want to be hanging out with, you know, download the ebook on your phone, and you can just sit there and watch it, or rather read it on the sly. So, so now we get to really the part of the episode that for me is going to be sort of the hardest to talk about in any kind of cohesive manner. And that is the Christmas of 1988. And I even wrote on the card here, I put the most Christmassy Christmas. Because when I think of the Christmases, not even just of my childhood, but really of my entire life, there's something about the Christmas of 1988 that just really sticks out in my mind as just being the absolute best Christmas. And to give you an idea of how awesome it was, I don't know what I got for Christmas that year. Like, I can't remember. So this Christmas was just awesome on its own merits, and not because, like, oh, I got Voltron or something for Christmas that year. This was the Christmas of 6th grade. And for those of you that have been watching all the flashback episodes, you may remember that 6th grade that would have been my first year living back with my mom, like when I moved back with my mom. So of course that made me very happy. And I was going to the same elementary school that I had gone to for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. So I was like back, you know, in my home territory or whatever. And you know, it was the same kids that were in my class when I came back were the kids that had been in my classes in like kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And all the kids that I'm used to being around are there. And that was pretty cool. And this was the first Christmas that I really remember getting into like Christmas decorations and Christmas decorating. And just to give credit where credit is due, that's really 100% thanks to Jonathan, because he was really into that stuff. His dad was into that stuff. Like they went out and got the Christmas lights that, like the chasers, when nobody had those. Like in the late 80s, those people would just go get normal Christmas lights. Maybe the ones with the big bulbs that you had to screw in, or the ones with the little bulbs. But you either had like a clear set or you had a colored set. There weren't these icicle things. There weren't like lights with movement. And at least in my recollection, the late 80s is when those started to kind of show up on the scene. And Jonathan's dad bought a couple of like gigantic strands of those things. Given my choice, the best Christmas lights are the ones with the big bulbs that you unscrew. But I mean, those use a lot of electricity. And just as an aside, I had totally forgotten about this until, for some reason, a few episodes ago, Bithead 1000 was talking about Christmas lights. I don't remember in what context. Just giving his opinions on what it is and isn't okay to decorate your house with. But he mentioned that when they were kids, they would sneak up to people's houses and unscrew those light bulbs. Because you would take them out in the street and you'd smash them, you know, or you would take them somewhere else and have them in your pocket and you'd throw it, because they'd make a little pop, you know, when you smashed them. But with those strands of lights, you could unscrew a bulb and the rest of the string wouldn't go out. So it was a lot easier. You could unscrew one bulb, and if you were sly about it, it's not like all of a sudden the entire string would die and somebody might notice. So we used to do that. But anyway, so they used to decorate the outside of their house, and they would put stuff out in the lawn too. This was, of course, way before people were buying things like big inflatable reindeer, or, you know, now you can get those little like projectors that project things on the side of your house, which I personally don't care for those. If you like those, then, you know, whatever puts you in the Christmas spirit, you should do. But they didn't have any of that kind of stuff, but they had a few things that they would put out. And Jonathan would decorate his room a little bit, and he got me into doing that, and I still do it. And really, that's why I have this string of lights here, is I've always liked having in whatever room I hang, you know, when I was a kid, it was my bedroom. Now, obviously, I don't sleep in here, but this is still kind of where I hang out. I love putting up lights just because, you know, I guess I like the mood it creates, but really it's because it reminds me of Christmas time. Even if it's like June, if it's like at night and I'm going to sit in here and play Sega Genesis, shut all the lights off and turn on the Christmas lights, and it's just there's something comforting and nostalgic about that. And that started for me hanging out with Jonathan and him doing that, because then, of course, you know, I rode my bike over to the drugstore, which it's probably the same. I think I mentioned that drugstore in a Halloween episode. There was this Long's Drugs near our house that would have like an aisle that was like the seasonal stuff. So, you know, before Halloween, that's where we would all go buy Halloween costumes and like the fake blood and all the other stuff that we needed. And then after Halloween, they would switch gears, and those aisles would have Christmas decorations and whatnot. And so I'd get a little bit of money in my pocket, and I would run my bike over there, and I'd buy like a box or two of Christmas lights, and, you know, I'd put them up, you know, in the corner, you know, between the wall and the ceiling, all around my room. And, you know, I would tape them up with Scotch tape or with masking tape, and they'd fall down. I'd have to fix them. But yeah, that all started then. And then the other thing that Jonathan and I both did is we decorated our desks at school, because at least for me, 6th grade, you were still in elementary school. And I know in some places, 6th grade is the first year of middle school, in which case you don't have just one desk anymore because you're moving around. But in where I was living, 6th grade, you just have the one classroom, you have your desk. And so we'd bring in like a battery operated light set and maybe string that along the periphery of the desk. Maybe put out like some of that like plastic garland stuff. And then I specifically remember, I don't know if we got them at a craft store or a hobby store, we had like little Christmas trees that were like that tall. And I guess people, you know, they would put out little Christmas displays or something. It's the kind of thing that you might buy if you had like a model train set, but we didn't buy this at that kind of store. But you'd get like the little tree and put it out, and we had like little strings of garland that we would wrap around it and stuff. So we really got into Christmas. Jonathan, of course, got spoiled at Christmas, and so I kind of would live vicariously through him sometimes. Speaking of school, so as I said, part of the reason that I call the Christmas of '88 the most Christmassy Christmas is I don't think I ever got into the Christmas spirit as much as I did that year. It was just like this sensory overload of just like Christmas awesomeness. And one of the things I remember that they did every year at my elementary school, it was something they even did, back when I was in first or second grade, is there would be like a Christmas program that they would put on. Like we would all go to the multi-purpose room, right? Like every elementary school that was, built in like the 60s or 70s, which was like probably most of the elementary and middle schools where I was growing up, they had like the multi-purpose room, right? And it had like the kitchen for the cafeteria was attached to it. And then on most days, the multi-purpose room just had the big long tables and benches where you would sit and eat. But those could all be folded up and like pushed against the wall, because then on one end of the multi-purpose room was a stage. And like they might have someone come in, like a puppeteer or something, to come entertain us. Or there might just be some kind of assembly where like the principal was going to talk to us about something. Or in this case, it was for this Christmas program. So it was like, there was, you could join like a choir at the school if you wanted to sing. Or we of course had a band, like a little orchestra. And it was of course terrible because it was elementary school kids. But that's how you get started, if you want to be in band in like high school or college or whatever. And so we would all, and this would happen on like the last day of school before Christmas vacation started. We would all file into the multi-purpose room. We would all sit on the floor, and they would put on this whole Christmas program where they would like play some like, just musical Christmas songs, like just, with instruments. And then like the choir would come on and they would sing some Christmas carols. And it's one of these things that sticks in my mind just to this day, that I can think about this and it kind of puts me in the Christmas spirit, is that the very last song that the choir would sing, that was like the end of the program, is they would sing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. And they would sing that while we were all filing out. And I don't know what it is about that. So to this day, I still love that song just because it reminds me of that. And then we would all file out of there, and you'd walk single file, like we were prisoners or something, which we kind of were, back to your classroom. And then, maybe it was like 2:00 or something, and you'd have a little Christmas party, and then we would go home, right? And then that was it, like, see you in like 16 days or whatever. And you'd go in there, and like maybe your teacher brought in like a tape player or a little stereo, and they put on like a tape with like some Christmas music on it. And maybe your teacher brought in like a crock pot or something that we could have some hot apple cider in. And usually they would pass out like the little candy canes that were like individually wrapped in plastic, like where you would just open it like a bag of chips and take out the candy cane, and it was like that big, and usually it was broken, so you were just taking out pieces. You didn't usually get big candy canes at school. At least I didn't. That was the last bit of school you had before vacation, and it was just a nice note to go out on, because then you'd walk home or your parents would come pick you up, and it just put you in the Christmas spirit, and now you had like 2 or 2.5 weeks off of school, and that just got you super excited. And other things I want to mention that just sort of helped put me in the Christmas spirit, especially back then. And again, this is what I'm talking about. It's kind of disjointed, but were commercials on TV. There were just certain commercials that would play that I remember also from this time, which is why I put it on this card, that would just put me in the Christmas spirit. And some of them were just local commercials that aren't going to mean anything to you, where it was like, the local drugstore had like some special Christmas commercial they'd play every year with the same jingle, and it would just, it's like something that reminded you that it was Christmas again. But one that was like a national commercial that I always remember, and I would hope that anybody who's about my age that grew up in the United States, at least, or North America, remembers was the Hershey's Kisses Christmas commercial, like the original little silver Hershey's Kisses. And it was, I don't know if it was stop motion animation or how they did it, because it wasn't like a cartoon, but it was animated, and it was like 9 or 12 or however many of these Hershey's Kisses, and they were like bells, and they were doing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," but like bells. And I just remember, like, they would play that commercial, And it was just one of those little things that just like, oh, it's Christmas, and it would make you feel like warm. Now, on the flip side of that, what I used to absolutely hate is if it was the 26th or later, I would hate it when they would show those commercials on TV, you know, because these companies would buy some advertising package that's okay, we're going to show your commercials for this length of time. And so even though like Christmas was over, and they still do that to this day, there'd be like Christmas commercials on TV, or you're watching a football game and they might still have the little Christmas decorations on the graphics on the TV. And I used to hate that because for me, it's just like when Christmas is over, it's like over. You know, like Christmas Day, as it wore on, you got almost this sinking feeling in your stomach because like all of the Christmas joy that you had from like the day after Thanksgiving until Christmas morning was gone, and you were going to have to wait 11 months before you got it back again. Another thing back home when I was with my mom that I used to love, and that, you know, I haven't been home in a very long time, but another thing that it was like Christmas sensory overload. We had something called Christmas Tree Lane, and it was like this mile-long stretch of this residential street, and it was where like all the rich people lived in town. But it was kind of this given that if you lived on this street, you were going to participate. And, you know, it's like if you didn't want to do this, like don't buy a house on this street, because every year everybody on this street would like decorate the crap out of their house for Christmas, like over the top Christmas decorations, not like gaudy or anything, but just like, you know, pull out all the stops, you know, like you had like a really nice, tasteful, but like intricate light pattern or you know, light display on your house. You put like some lawn decorations out, and then lining the street were these really tall, like old growth, like redwoods, you know, not like giant sequoias, but very mature trees. And somebody, like there was like an organization that all the homeowners had to pay into that paid for all this. They would come out and all of those trees were strung up with Christmas lights. And there was like this speaker system all throughout Christmas Tree Lane that was nonstop playing Christmas carols. And so the idea is that even though it was like the dead of winter and it was freezing cold, you would drive down the street with your windows rolled down. And of course the speed limit was like, you know, 3 miles an hour. So you were driving really slow, and you had the cold breeze coming in from the open windows, and, you know, you could smell people's fireplaces burning, and you'd hear the Christmas carols. And it was just all this like visual sensory overload with all of the Christmas lights and everything. And I mean, I would have gone through that thing 3 times a day, every day of the Christmas season, if I could. But usually I had to beg someone to take me down Christmas Tree Lane because, you know, I don't know, my parents and grandparents weren't that interested in it, but I always loved it. And it's one of the biggest things I miss about not living in the city where I grew up, is I would love to go back to Christmas Tree Lane because I know they still do it. And then the next thing, to sort of shift gears a little bit, as I did every year, even when I lived with my mom until he passed away, I spent Christmas with my dad. So like school would get out, and then sometime in the next few days, I had to go to my dad's house. And usually that means I would hop on the train. I have plenty of memories of riding the train when I was a kid during the holidays, because then the train was very crowded. And I would just meet all kinds of characters. You know, I mean, I rode the train all throughout the year if I was going to visit my dad. But, you know, on some random Friday night in, you know, the middle of April or something, the train was not even half full, or probably not even a quarter full. But if it was the holiday season, people who maybe just didn't have cars or didn't want to deal with it were riding the train, and the trains would literally be full. And so I certainly wasn't getting like a whole, you know, a pair of seats to myself to put my Game Boy out or to set up shop for 3 or 4 hours. I was going to have to sit next to somebody. And like, I remember one time I had to sit next to some guy who was just like super drunk. And even though I was like 11 years old, he's like talking to me and being all like not inappropriate in a creepy way, but just like, you know, telling me about his daughter. Like, oh, I'm going to give you my phone number and you're going to call and you're going to go out with my daughter, but, you know, you better not, you know, whatever, you know. I was just like, whoa, dude, you know. So I don't know, whatever. But so, and the sad part of that is that my mom spent Christmas alone pretty much every year, because like I had to go be with my dad, and she wasn't married yet at that point, and so she would just be by herself, and that used to kind of bum me out. But But, you know, after Christmas, I would come back. And so I was back for New Year's. So I was only gone for a few days. But, you know, Christmas is not really a day that you want to be by yourself. But that's not to say that I didn't enjoy going and spending Christmas with my dad. I had to put up with my stepmom, obviously, which was never cool. But my dad, more than anybody when I was growing up, was really into Christmas. And so, like, I would go there and, like, he would go out and get a tree every year. My mom didn't really usually get a tree. He would get a tree, and they would really decorate the crap out of the tree. Again, not in a way that was, like, garish, but, like, you know, you'd look at that and be like, wow, that's a really nice Christmas tree, you know, with the lights and the spheres. And they would get that that tinsel, which was awful because it would get everywhere, right? Like, Christmas would be over, and the tree was gone, and you'd still find strands of tinsel somewhere. But, you know, as long as you don't use too much of it, tinsel looks pretty cool. But there'd be, like, the silver garland going around the tree, too. So, I mean, the tree would just be done up, you know? And then, you know, that had, like, the little ground covering around it, like that big felt circle with the slash in it, so you could slide it under the tree. And there would just be a million presents shoved under there. And so, I mean, you know, as much as I didn't want to deal with my stepmom and I didn't like leaving my mom, you know, if you want to be in the Christmas spirit, really, I mean, being with my dad was kind of the place to be. But again, like I said at the beginning, as odd as it sounds, I could not tell you what I got for Christmas that year. I could only guess. And sort of the weirder thing about that, about not knowing what I got for Christmas, sort of noteworthy in my opinion, the two games, video games, in the Christmas of '88 that were like the games everybody wanted were, and I've talked about this before, but were Super Mario Brothers 2 and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. And I remember them being hard to find, especially for some reason. I think Zelda 2 was hard to come by. But you know, you'd go to Toys R Us and there wouldn't be any little slips in the little pouch for you to grab, so they weren't easy to come by. And but I don't think I even asked for one of those. It was one of those things I knew, like, it was a given Jonathan was going to get those games, and so I'm like, well, I'll just play them over at Jonathan's house, you know, and that would allow me to ask for something else. But then, like I said, I couldn't tell you what I got for Christmas that year. Which seems kind of bizarre, but that is exactly what happened. Jonathan got both of those games for Christmas, and so I used to go play them over at his house. And I did, as I've mentioned at some point in the past, I did rent Super Mario Brothers 2. So it was a good game back then. You know, none of us were upset that it wasn't the exact same game as the original Super Mario Brothers or the original Legend of Zelda. We thought they were good games and we enjoyed them. Maybe older kids knew better, if you want to say that, and had a problem with them. But to this day, I still think that those are both great games. Now, before we get to the next segment here, first of all, my mouth is getting kind of dry, although I think my homemade Christmas punch is cold by now. Pour myself a fresh mug. We'll get to the next package. And this package comes from Derek and Theresa over in Wisconsin, in a town called Mauston, Wisconsin, which I don't know where that is. Sorry. But Derek and Theresa both hang out in the chat room of my live streams every Tuesday night, which is really awesome. I kind of refer to them as like the Classic Gaming Quarterly live stream power couple. I don't know. I just think it's cool that they hang out. But they sent me this package a few weeks ago, but they told me it was a Christmas package, and so I kind of waited until Christmas, and I told them I'm going to wait and show it on the show. I mean, I have already looked in here, so it's not like a surprise. I was originally thinking I was going to wrap these all up and like open them on the show, but something about that just felt a little bit tacky to me, so I didn't do it. But yeah, so it's funny because the outside of this box says Kickapoo on it, and I was like, Kickapoo? What is there, a puppy in here? But you know, as I've said many, many times, I'm really not that smart, and that's of course a cockapoo, not a Kickapoo. So anyway, they I don't know actually who wrote the letter because it's signed by both of them. Somebody sent me, well, them together. They sent me a very nice letter that I just wanted to say. I'm not going to read the whole letter because it's very long. I mean, I very much enjoyed it. I'm saying I'm not going to read it to you guys, but the first line says, "I know how you are a bit of a paper aficionado, so I made sure to compose this on resume paper." And I just wanted you to know that I appreciate that. This is very nice paper. I have like a whole box of this type of paper in my desk at work, and that's what I use for everything. Life's too short to use crappy paper. But yeah, anyway, so I'll just get to what's in the box here. The first thing I got here, he sent me, I really appreciated this because I wanted to pick this up and I just never got around to it, is he picked me up this copy of the Hockey News. The reason that he picked this up for me is that it has an article in it called The Oral History of NHL 94. I don't understand, what is all this oral history stuff lately? I see so many articles in magazines or on the internet, and it's always the oral history of everything. I don't like that personally, because I know like an oral history is more like, it's just snippets of people talking about stuff. It's like a text version of like the Video Game Years video series. But it's almost like, well, you know, instead of actually doing research and properly writing something, we just do the oral history, and then it's just people talking about it. So, you know, whatever. But this is actually a really good article, so I'm not... what I just said doesn't mean that it's not a good article, because it is. So it was written by this guy, Sal Barry, who actually reached out. He saw my video and watched it, I guess, and reached out to me on Twitter because he was trying to get me to put him in contact with Amory Wong, who programmed the Super Nintendo version of the game. But then I guess he ended up getting in touch with Amory without my help. So, but yeah, it's really cool, you know. I wish I had gotten to write it, you know, but I don't have any experience writing magazine articles. So I mean, what would I know? And Sal did a very good job, and Sal's a good writer. But I really appreciate you guys sending me this, because like I said, I had the intention of going and buying it, but you know, it's one of those things where you just know you're not going to get around to it. And sure enough, I didn't get around to it. So again, thank you. And then they sent me some coffee. You know, the two things, you know, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to sound cool or anything, because I really hate when people do that kind of thing, but 90% of my water intake comes in the form of coffee or beer, especially in the winter when I'm really not ever that thirsty. So it was cool that they sent me coffee, is my point. And so that's the reason that the box says Kickapoo on it, is because this coffee is from Kickapoo Coffee Roasters, which is local to them coffee roaster. So I guess this is the coffee that they drink themselves at home. Lovingly roasted in Viroqua, Wisconsin. I hope I said that right. And then they just sent me. It's just two different roasts: organic radio wave and organic driftless. So thank you. My wife and I will both be enjoying that. We spend a lot of money on coffee because I think, like you guys, we prefer to buy this kind of, you know, coffee rather than buying the gigantic bag at Costco, because it really is better. And for how much coffee I drink, I want to enjoy it. And then just the last thing in the box, which also came from the good folks at Kickapoo. Sorry, I have to unwrap it here. But it came with a mug from Kickapoo, and this is a cool mug just because the shape of the mug is reminiscent of like an old school diner mug. So you see it says Kickapoo, coffee roasters on one side, and then just has like a, you know, coffee leaves and a few coffee beans on the other side. But you know, it's that really, really thick, well, I don't know if it's porcelain or what it is, but you know, it's ceramic material, and then it kind of has like that hourglass figure. And then I just noticed this now, but this is very cool. On the bottom, you can, hopefully it'll focus, made in the USA, which, you know, I'm really big into buying American, so I really appreciate that the folks at Kickapoo are selling mugs that are made in the US. So thank you very much to both Derek and Theresa. So next, I have here Christmas presents, like memorable Christmas presents from my childhood. And as I said, it kind of amazes me how many Christmases I couldn't tell you what I got for Christmas, because I feel like, you know, it feels like these days, like Christmas is so materialistic, right? Or at least that's how I felt for a long time, you know, because when you're a kid, it seems like all you care about is like, well, what am I getting for Christmas, and what am I going to ask for Christmas? And then, like, once you open your Christmas presents, it kind of feels like, well, maybe Christmas is over now. And And then you become a young adult, and you become maybe a little bit cynical, and you look back and you think, yeah, Christmas is just about, materialism and blah, blah, blah. And I think it's only when you get older and you get a little bit more wisdom, like my age, that you really realize that Christmas when you were a kid was about a lot more than what you thought it was about. And the fact that you were getting a Christmas present was just one small piece of that overall puzzle. And I think that has a lot to do with the reason why I can't remember what I got for Christmas for so many years of my childhood. But I did write down some things here that stand out in my mind as being like things that, they were good enough presents that I remember them to this day or whatever. And the first one is from 1986. So, 1986 is not one of the Christmases we're going over, but I remember that in 1986 I was in the 4th grade, and we had this guy, and I can't remember his name. We had this music teacher who would come to our classroom like once a week for like an hour or something, and he would just teach us about music. Like, he wasn't teaching us how to play an instrument. He was just teaching us like about music history. He might teach us about the different kinds of instruments, but he wasn't like showing us how to play any of them. But then he had this big, or I was a little kid, so maybe it wasn't that big, but my recollection was that it was this really big keyboard, like a full-size, like 88-key keyboard that he would bring in this big case, and he would set that up, and he would play that for us. He would play songs for us, or like, I remember, like, as an example, he wanted to teach us about ragtime music. The most famous example, I would say, of ragtime would be The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. So, he wrote, this guy, this teacher, wrote this song about the life of Scott Joplin and played that for us. But because of that, and because of watching him, like, I really, really wanted to learn how to play the piano. So I guess, he did a good job, because he certainly piqued my interest in music, because he made me want to get a keyboard and learn how to play the piano. And so that's what I asked for Christmas that year in '86, and I actually got one. And I made a little minor reference to that a long time ago, that I had this keyboard, because I remember, when I moved back with my mom, I took my keyboard with me, of course, and it was this Casio MT100 keyboard. And so it was a very small keyboard. It was what you would classify as a toy keyboard. Not because it was some bright color or did stupid things, but it was a shrunken down keyboard with much smaller keys. It had lots of different sounds plugged into it, like you could mimic different instruments, and it had the little, you could have the little accompaniment button that would like play some kind of drum beat for you, so you could play. And I got that, and I got like some kind of book about, how to play the piano or whatever. And I just remember this was during a time when my dad had bought a camcorder, and he was starting to take home movies. Because I know that he had it at this time because there's a home movie of that Christmas. Again, it was Christmas Eve. But I remember, watching it, and you can see, like, I really didn't know what I was getting. Like, I didn't peek. There was a big box under the tree. I didn't know what it was. And as soon as I started to open it, I could see it said Casio on it, and you could see like the little picture of a keyboard. And I remember I got so excited, and I was like ripping the paper off. I'm like, not excited. Like, there's the famous video of the N64 kid. He's opening. He's like, Nintendo 64. He's like, nothing like that. I was just like excited, and I was like, yeah. And I was opening it, and I just remember you can hear my stepmom in the background being like, okay, calm down. When I got the keyboard, it was like, okay, well, now you have to take piano lessons. Which kind of sucked, because really I just wanted the keyboard to play with. But at the same time, it's like, why buy me a keyboard if I'm not going to learn how to play it? I mean, I should have thought of that as a nice gift of like, hey, here's this keyboard, and we're going to pay for you to get piano lessons. But at the time, it just felt like more school. Like, you're going to go to school for like 8 hours a day, and then like one night a week, you're going to go off to piano lessons. Because then, of course, my stepmom would kind of like police me and make me practice for, a half hour or whatever every night. Because I guess that's what happened to her. Like, when she was growing up, they had a piano in the house, and so they had to learn how to play it. But anyway, it's still, it's still one of my favorite Christmas memories in terms of getting a present, because I was just so super excited about that keyboard. So that was 86. 87, I told that story. I got my Nintendo sort of for Christmas in 87. It was a very early Christmas gift. I got it in October. But, as you would expect, that means I didn't get a Christmas present that year because I got my Christmas present in October. So, still an awesome gift. But I just kind of wish I'd gotten to open it on Christmas morning. Like, that just would have been cool. Because as I've said, I didn't get very many video games for Christmas. And so it would have been a cool memory to have. But, like I said, I think my dad wanted to play it too. And so he gave it to me early so we could both play it. In 1988, as I just got finished talking about, I just don't know what I got for Christmas in 1988. I just wrote down Legos and NES games, ? Like, I'm sure I got Legos because that's when I'd already gotten into Legos, but I couldn't tell you like who gave me what, or like I don't have a memory of like getting one and opening it, so I don't know, 1989, we already talked about that a few episodes ago on Flashback. That was the Game Boy. That's just another great Christmas memory. I peeked, so I already knew what was in the package. That, for whatever reason, that year we opened Christmas presents on Christmas morning instead of Christmas Eve. I kind of get the idea that probably my stepmom wanted to wait until Christmas morning because she was more traditional, but like my dad just couldn't wait. So maybe she won out that year or something because, it wasn't until Christmas morning that we actually opened presents, and I got my Game Boy, which, I had to kind of pretend I was surprised, and they knew. It's like, oh, you peeked, because I wasn't like surprised enough. And, then we took that road trip, not a road trip. We took a car ride, like a 2-hour or 2.5-hour car ride to my aunt and uncle's house. And so I was in the back seat playing the Game Boy the whole time. So that was a cool memory. And then 1990, this was another kind of a big one, I guess, for me, or at least I really liked this. So Jonathan knew where his parents stashed his Christmas presents. It was in their closet, in their bedroom. And I just remember one day we came home from school because, I used to go over to Jonathan's house pretty much every day after school. And he wanted to show me. He's like, hey, look, come see what my parents got me for Christmas. And so, because his mom wasn't home. His mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she must have been out shopping or something because we had the house to ourselves. And so we went into the closet there, and, he rooted around in some shelf, and he brought down this Casio watch. And it was this Casio, like, DBC 30 or DBC 60 data bank calculator watch. And yeah, it was a calculator watch, and, like, that's cool, I guess, or whatever. But what we really thought was cool about the watch was that the reason it was called, like, a DBC, I think, 30, was that it had enough memory for you to store, like, 30... somebody's name and phone number, and I don't think you could put an address in there. I think it was really just name and phone number. And I don't think I had asked for anything for Christmas yet from my dad, and so I went and told him I wanted the exact same watch. But anyway, so that watch, so that was 8th grade. Christmas of 1990 was 8th grade, and I had that watch. I wore that watch for about a year, and then when I was a freshman in high school, in gym class, I would go into the locker room and you'd change and put on your gym clothes, and I used to take off my watch and I would put it in the locker. And one day I was taking it out to put it on and I dropped it and it hit the concrete floor, and it looked fine, but like something on the inside broke so that you couldn't see anything on the screen anymore. It was like there was no, like the screen was just gray or whatever, and so it just didn't, like, you could still push the buttons and hear the beeping and everything, but you couldn't see anything. And then, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago, for some reason, I just like decided I really wanted one again. And at that time, you could still get these watches on Amazon for not that bad of a price. Now they kind of went up because I think now like hipsters or whatever want like some of these cool old Casio watches. But this is not the exact same watch, but it's very close. And that's the, I'll move my face so it'll glary there, but that's almost it looks the same, except this one has little individual keys on it, whereas the one I had just had this big membrane. And this is a DBC 62, so that means you can put 62 phone numbers in there. Something happened to this one, though, too. Even though I've just been keeping this one in a drawer, something's wrong with the screen on this one, too. It doesn't really matter, because it's, it's not like I'm going to wear this watch, but, although I did wear it for a while when I bought it, but it got a little scratch on it. It's like, oh, I can't do that. Because now you can't get this watch anymore. Or if you can, you're going to pay like way too much money for it. But like I said, something happened to the screen. It's got like extra little things showing up on it. So I don't even know how to fix that. The battery was dead and I replaced it, and that's when I noticed that. So, But anyway, that might seem stupid. It's just a calculator watch, but I just remember like I really loved that watch when I got it, and I was very happy that I got that for Christmas that year. So, which seems weird because in 1990, like, wouldn't I have rather had like some NES games? I'm not sure if I had my computer yet by then, or if I didn't get that until like the spring of '91. But it was in 8th grade, but it may have been after Christmas. But I don't know why I wasn't asking for video games, but I guess I was just weird that way. But in 1991. So that was the last Christmas that I had with my dad before he passed away. I don't know if I didn't ask for anything, or I don't know what the deal was, but he just gave me $100. I put $100 in a card and gave it to me, and I was pretty excited about that. And like I said, I don't know why. Maybe because what I ended up spending the money on was a Lego set. Now I was like 14. I was 14. So I was getting to the point where, like, maybe it wasn't super cool to be playing with Legos anymore. Like, now as an adult, like, when you're an adult, you just do whatever you want, right? But, you know, at that age, it was just like, I think my dad was like, you know, is he going to grow up or what? And of course, you know, you didn't go to school, because by then I was a freshman in high school. You don't go to high school and start, like, telling, hey, everybody, look what I got for Christmas. I bought a Lego set. But, you know, as I said in the last couple episodes, you know, I kind of grew up at a slower rate than most people. So, you know, I was probably 14 going on 12. You know, in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm 41 now, and I still feel like a 12-year-old sometimes. Like, you know, 6th grade, being 12 years old was like kind of the best time of my life. And so I kind of feel in a lot of ways that I never kind of outgrew it. But anyway, so he gave me $100. And part of it, that probably just sticks out in my mind because it was the last thing I ever got from him. But it also sticks out in my mind because what I used it on was I went to Toys R Us and I bought a Lego train, which I still have, and in fact I still have it built. I mean, I had to rebuild it, but I have it built up in the other room. I had always wanted the Lego space monorail, but I think by 1991 you couldn't get it anymore. I also remember, so here's kind of a weird memory that just popped into my head. I forgot about this. So that Christmas, for some reason, on Christmas morning, we were over at their friend's house, like this other couple that they didn't have kids. They invited us to come over and have Christmas morning with them, which was fine because I liked them. They were nice. And we spent Christmas over there. And so that's when I got my $100. And then I remember that other couple gave me, it was a VHS tape that I bet I still have somewhere that, you know, it was one of those really cheap quality VHS tapes where you'd put it in there and you had to like adjust the tracking so it was way off of normal to get it to play, but it was the kind of thing you could get at a drugstore for probably like $2. But it was an Abbott and Costello full episode of the old show, and it included the Who's on First sketch, but it also had like the, you know, back when they used to do the commercials themselves, you know, like there'd be like the little intermission, but then like, you know, Abbott was the one sitting down with the sponsor who was like Oil of Olay, or no, it was Palmolive. And doing that, and then there was like some other, because like I said, it was one complete episode, but it included the Who's on First sketch. And I remember, like, I really liked that. I took that home and watched it, and I'd never seen Abbott and Costello before. Like, the Who's on First thing is very famous, but I'd never actually watched it. You would just see other people reenacting it, and I just remember thinking that was like so cool. Yeah. So anyway, and like I said, that's really the last Christmas present that I got as a child that was really all that memorable. So we have one more Christmas to talk about, and then one more package to show. So, you know, I don't want to bring everybody down or anything, but just to, you know, set the stage here or whatever. You know, I mentioned, so 1991 Christmas was my last Christmas with my dad before he passed away. And he actually passed away not long after Christmas, like maybe a month later, less than a month later. So, but as I said earlier, every Christmas vacation, I would, you know, I always had to travel, right? When I was in 2nd grade is when my dad moved out of the city my mom lived in. And from then on, every holiday season, I had to travel between the two. And so, again, it was always Christmas with my dad and always New Year's with my mom, regardless of who I lived with. So when I was with my dad, I would just stay until after Christmas and then go to my mom's house. And when I was with my mom, I would immediately leave and go be with my dad, and then stay until after Christmas and then go back to my mom's house, right? So 1992, this is the last Christmas I have written down here, was sort of my first Christmas without my dad. And so it was weird for a couple of reasons. And, you know, by then my dad he'd passed away 11 months earlier, and so it's not like, you know, it wasn't like still very raw, but it just felt weird, you know, because my dad he had a big personality, and so he was like a big presence in my life, and so to have him gone was a very odd feeling. But as I said, you know, he was sort of like the spirit of Christmas in my life, and so with him gone, my mom was just kind of like, yeah, Christmas, you know, like whatever. Like I remember one year when my dad was still around, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't usually have a Christmas tree. And I remember one year we got a tree only because my mom was driving home from work on like Christmas Eve or maybe on the 23rd. And there was a Christmas tree lot along the road that she drove to go home. And they had a sign out that said like any tree, $5, because it was either that or they were going to the chipper, right? Because it was too late. And so she pulled over and bought a tree, and we actually had a tree in the house that year, and it was like weird. It was like, wow, we have a tree. And so all of a sudden, this was my first Christmas vacation where I really had nowhere to go. Now, I will say we had a Christmas tree that year, though. My mom bought an artificial tree, which I wasn't super into, but, you know, it was a nice 6-foot tree, and we decorated it, and it looked really nice. And I remember that I got the Lego train that I had bought with my Christmas money from the previous year, and I actually set it up under the tree. Like, that's a stereotypical thing under a Christmas tree, is having like a model train. And so I set up the Lego train and had that running underneath, and that was pretty cool. But like I said, it was the first time that, you know, I have 2 weeks off, and I felt like I really just have 2 weeks off because I don't have to go anywhere or deal with people that I don't want to deal with. And so I really just hung out at home. And, you know, we watched movies. Like I watched movies with my mom. You know, we'd rent stuff or whatever, or we watched football a lot. And of course I played a lot of video games. Like I don't, you know, it was always hard to get friends to hang out too much during Christmas vacation because their families would be doing stuff, or like, you know, little Tommy's grandma was visiting from Memphis or something. And so he wasn't allowed to come out and play or something like that. So I really just remember being just home the whole time. And so it really felt weird because I didn't really have a whole lot that was really putting me in the Christmas spirit. And this may seem odd, but one of the big things I remember is that, as I said earlier, my grandmother, she left and went to the East Coast every Christmas. And so it was just my mom and I in the house. And so my mom decided to paint the inside of the house because it needed it. You know, the walls just needed to get painted. And with my grandma gone, because my grandma was the kind of person, like, she would freak out about the mess. Because we're putting down drop cloths everywhere and covering everything, and there's paint everywhere, and like it would stress her out. And so it was easier. She would just leave. We'd paint the house, and then everything would be all cleaned up, and she'd come home and be like, "Oh my gosh, it looks so nice in here." And so that's what we did, and that included my room. So, you know, I got everything in my room and like sort of gathered it up towards the middle of the room, and we covered it up, and I got to paint my own room. Like my mom let me even do it. It was just, I mean, it was the same color paint we used everywhere else, which was like off-white. But it was kind of cool. I got to paint my own room and, you know, just like I said, watch movies and listen to music and play video games. And it was kind of relaxing. But, you know, because my dad wasn't around and I wasn't doing all that, you know, the flip side of that was that I really had a hard time getting into the Christmas spirit. When just a few years earlier, it was the Christmassiest Christmas or whatever, the most Christmassy Christmas. And now all of a sudden it's this Christmas where it's like I almost felt like dead inside. It was like, yeah, it's Christmas, so what? And but the couple things I remember about that Christmas. The first of all, that Christmas started a pretty important holiday tradition for me that still exists to this day. And no, this is not a sponsored video, but that is Christmas Crunch. And if you want to see me be an upset panda, you know, if I can't find my Christmas Crunch, it's the only time of the year I eat this kind of stuff, because I try to eat kind of healthy, you know, aside from all the beer I drink, but, and the sausage I eat. But, you know, I kind of treat myself every Christmas, as long as I can track it down. I buy 2 boxes of Christmas Crunch and I put them away in the closet because my little self-imposed rule is that I'm not allowed to eat this until my Christmas vacation officially starts, which, today actually is the last day of work. I got off of work today, and my Christmas vacation has officially started, which means that tomorrow for breakfast I can have my Christmas Crunch. And the first time I ever had that was Christmas of 1992, because, you know, my mom and I went to the grocery store for whatever reason, and I had never seen Christmas Crunch before. Like, I don't know when it got started, back then the box was much simpler looking. It was just a green box. And so for anybody that doesn't know, Christmas Crunch cereal is just Crunch Berry cereal, really. But back when Christmas Crunch first started, it was literally, it just had crunch berries in it, but it just had red and green crunch berries. And now they're in these stupid fun holiday shapes, but it still just tastes like crunch berry cereal. And I got her to buy me a box or a couple boxes, I don't even remember, which was cool because I wasn't allowed to eat stuff like that normally. Like my mom would not buy me like junk food, generally speaking, and especially not these sugary cereals. And after that, every year, it was just like a given that like, oh yeah, of course you can have your Christmas Crunch. And then a few years later, obviously, I was old enough that I just bought my own Christmas Crunch. And there's been a few years where for whatever reason, it didn't make it all the way out here to the West Coast. And I'm always a little, disappointed. I'm not that upset, but I'm disappointed because to me, it's like a part of Christmas is having my Christmas Crunch cereal. And the other thing, I mentioned that I was going to wait and talk about Home Alone a little later. And that's because this was the first Christmas that I actually remember watching Home Alone. And I'm sure I'd seen it already before that. But I just remember that it was Christmas Eve. And as I said, I really had not been able to get into the Christmas spirit, like, at all. And, it just didn't even feel like Christmas. And I had this little 13-inch TV, like, it was a combination 13-inch TV VCR combo in my room, and I don't know how that ended up in my room. My mom bought it at some point, and I think it was out in the kitchen, and then somehow, I don't know if I was just borrowing it for some reason, but I remember that, it was like, I think my mom had maybe even already gone to bed or was just hanging out in her room, and I was kind of in my room alone, and I put on Home Alone, and I think I probably watched it twice, and I only did it because it was like a heroin addict, like trying to get high. I was just trying to get into the Christmas spirit. And I don't know how well it even really worked, but, really every year after that, I wasn't really able to get into the Christmas spirit. Even now, like, I don't have kids. And so, it's cool that it's Christmas. Like, I really look forward to buying Christmas presents for my wife because I love doing that. But other than that, it's just like the magic of, like, Christmases like 1988, I just can't seem to recapture, and it's kind of a bummer, but... maybe that's just part of growing up, especially when you don't have kids, that you can live vicariously through. So that's all my Christmas memories. And so trying to get some more fluids here. And then, so we got one more package to go through, which I'm actually very excited about. I don't like to say that I saved the best for last because that's cheapening the other cool things that I got. So these were all great, but at the same time, this last one came along at a time when I really kind of needed it. I think anybody that makes videos for YouTube probably goes through the same thing, where sometimes you just want to walk away. Like you've just kind of had enough, and the sun just came out, so that's probably gonna mess up the white balance. But I'm not too worried about it. Right before this package came, I was laying on my couch, and I didn't have the TV on or any music on. I was just laying on the couch, just in silence. And for some reason, I thought about, and I think I was feeling stressed out about just, life and work and this show. And I had this notion in my head of like, well, what if I just quit? Like, what if I just walked away and like, I'm not making YouTube videos anymore? And I swear I felt this gigantic weight come off of my entire body. Even though I knew that there's no way I could do it. I mean, and it's true. There's no way I can walk away from my show. Like, at the end of the day, I love this stuff too much to walk away, but that doesn't mean that it's not stressful. But then this came, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I think this came in the mail the very next day. And so this guy, I guess Steven, I don't know if you go by Steve or, it says Steven on his emails. He sent me these two little tubes. And I had no notion that they were coming, so I had no idea what they were. I opened the first one here, and he wrote me a letter, but he printed it out. This is like an 11 by 17 print. And it's a very cool letter, but it also includes some pretty cool artwork. And, I get a lot of attention. Well, I don't get the attention, I guess. This sign gets a lot of attention. Like, anybody who watches my show who's from Finland It's like, hey, why do you have that sign on your wall? Which is totally understandable. Like if I was watching a show, you know, from, you know, I don't know, Germany or something, and there was a sign from like UC Davis on the wall, I'd be like, hey, how come you have a UC Davis sign? There must be a cool story. But anyway, you know, I get a lot of questions about it and stuff. But so Steven drew, one of the things he drew a lot of stuff, because some of the stuff he sent me digitally, which I'll talk about in a second, and then I'll just overlay it on the screen. But so he took that sign and replaced kind of the creepy guy there with the beanie, and he stuck me in there, which I thought was, so there I am. I got my glasses. I even have my Nacional Ayrton Senna hat on, and then it still says whatever the thing is in Finnish there. But I just thought that was cool. He says in here that, or was he said it here, or if he says it, or if he said it in an email, but he oh yeah, he says it here. I felt like drawing some random stuff while watching your show the other day, and I figured you might get a kick out of it, and I absolutely did. And he says here, I can't tell if this is clever or the dumbest thing I've ever done. And I don't think I told him this in an email or not. I really can't remember if I did, or if I might have said something on a live stream. But this really came at a time, like I said, when I needed it, because I was really questioning like why I'm still doing this sometimes, because it's just, for all of the stress and the heartache that it sometimes causes, or frustration, you get something like this and it just reminds you of why you keep going. And the other one, I don't want to show one on this page because it's going to spoil the next one, but the other one that I just thought was really cool was this one down in the corner, because you can see there I'm holding a mallet, getting ready to smash an NES Max controller, because of course on an episode of Flashback I talked about, or it was that Dia de los Controllers or whatever episode that I did, where I mentioned how much I hate the NES Max controller. And it's funny because a lot of people kind of like jump to the defense of the NES Max controller. Hey, it's not that bad of a controller. But you have to remember, I got that controller in lieu of a game. Like any game, not any game, but most games would have been better than that controller. And so it was very, very disappointing. So that was one of the things he sent. And then the other thing he sent, I mean, I'm just telling you, Steven, like, when I opened these, it put the biggest smile on my face. I can't even tell you. And just immediately made me want to get back to work on my show. So, this was one of the first games I ever reviewed on my show, on the main channel, on Classic Gaming Quarterly. And it was also one of the very early games that I talked about over here on an episode of Flashback. And that is TNC Surf Designs Wood and Water Rage. And so what Steven did here was just draw, you know, something that seems like it was like pulled out of that game. But, you know, he inserted me into the picture there. So you can see, I can't see the screen because I'm, oh yeah, all right, well you can see it there. So, you know, there's me with my hat on and everything, and some board shorts riding on a skateboard. I assure you that is far better than I actually look with my shirt off, so I thank you for that as well, Steven. But, I mean, that's just really awesome, and, you know, I had the biggest smile on my face, like I said, when I opened these and looked at them, and, you know, the only reason that this is not already in a frame is I just wanted to wait until I could, you know, show it to everybody here on this video, and now I'm going to go out and buy, like, an 11 by 17 frame or something, and hang it on the wall down in the basement. Even my wife got a big kick out of that. So I really can't thank you enough, Steven, and your package could not have come at a better time. You know, I guess based on the fact that I enjoyed the artwork so much, he sent me a link to a Google Drive where he had all this stuff digitally and some more stuff. And the coolest thing in the Google Drive that he didn't print out and send, because I guess he just thought it was not that big of a deal, but I got a huge kick out of, was he's another one of these people that thinks I should start making cooking videos. And so he made a piece of artwork for Classic Cooking Quarterly. And, you know, I don't have it in front of me to look at, but, you know, it's got me and I'm wearing like an apron, but like under the apron, I have my Ferrari shirt on. And then I have like a chef's hat, but it has like the Nacional logo on it. And then like I'm holding a tray that I think has a PlayStation on it. And I don't know. It just blew me away. I thought that was the coolest thing. I showed my wife that and she got a huge kick out of it. And then much more recently, just a few days ago, I did another live stream. It was a Sega Saturn live stream. And for anybody that doesn't watch the live streams, which is fine, I was playing the Sega Saturn, and one of the games I played was a light gun game. It was Virtua Cop 2. And just because of the way the setup is, you know, I've got like the screen, and then the webcam is like right next to the screen, and it's only like 4 feet away from me. I don't have a light gun here to kind of show you. I'll just use my finger or whatever. But so basically, I'm playing it, and like your view as the viewer is like I'm holding a gun, like kind of like this. So it's like really coming like out of the screen at you. I'm like back here, like boom, boom, boom. You know, I don't remember if it was one of the guests on the show, because I had the guys, 2 of the 3 guys from Retro Game Squad were like my guests on the live stream. So I don't know if it was one of them who was saying it, or if they were just reading something somebody said in the chat. But they were basically saying that like this whole view, like, oh, somebody should make like a movie poster out of that or something like that. And I just mentioned, I said, well, you know, I got this guy that watches my show who makes some drawings like that. Maybe we can get him to do something like that. And, you know, and then I thought nothing more of it and kind of moved on. And then when I woke up the next morning, I had an email in my inbox from him. And he drew a picture of me looking like RoboCop. So I'm wearing like a RoboCop helmet. And I have, again, not the Nacional logo on my hat, on the helmet that time. It's the logo off of the hat that I usually wear. And I forgot what it says exactly on top. But, you know, like, I don't know. I don't remember. But I just thought it was like the coolest thing. And I showed my wife that, and she was laughing so hard. And I showed that to her. I went to work and was like, there's a few people at work that know I have a YouTube show. And I was pulling my phone out and showing everybody like, hey, check this out. Because I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I really, Steven, I can't thank you enough. And, you know, he mentioned to me that you're worried about, you don't know what to put your stickers on because you don't want to waste them. And like, don't worry about it, Steven. Like, I will send you as many stickers as you would like. Like, I'll put several more in the mail for you right now if you want. I don't want you to have to worry about where your next selection of stickers is coming from. So, I think that's it. You know, again, just thank you to everybody that sent a postcard. Thank you to everybody that sent a package. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, just thank you to everybody that watches this show. You know, you don't have to send anything to the show to be cool in my eyes. Just every single one of you guys that watches all the episodes on CGQ Plus, whether you leave a comment or not, whether you hang out in the chat for the live streams or not. All of you guys are why I keep making this content and why I love working on this show so much. Even though this channel is so much smaller than the other channel, but like I love working on shows for this channel, and it's because of all of you guys. So everybody out there, like, you know, please have a Merry Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, have a happy, you know, whatever you might be celebrating, if anything. I hope that nobody out there is alone for the holidays, and if you are, please try to find somewhere to go or somebody to be with, so that you're not by yourself. And have a happy New Year. And 2019 is coming, and it's crazy how fast time is flying by when we're talking about things that happened 30 plus years ago. It makes me feel old. So that's going to do it for this episode of, I guess not an episode of Flashback proper because it's the Christmas special. But as always, thank you, honestly, to everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. And sorry, I was trying to find it real quick here. I'll just find it and I'll edit this part out. Page 50. See, they put it way in the back. 46, 48, 50. Yeah, here it is. Okay.